All right, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Kegler, and I work at SUNY Brockport. I'm the moderator for this session. Today, you are in the program. I'm sure you saw the link, but this is supporting students with mental health issues through collection development, outreach, reference, and instruction by Keri Thomas-Whiteside. Keri is a college librarian at SUNY Erie Community College North Campus. Her academic foci for the institution are acquisitions, assessment, and the role of information literacy across the college experience. Keri's acquisition role involves intersectional diversity of materials, updating of policies, and creation of rubrics and guidelines for weeding and selection. And I will be monitoring chat. And also, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A. And I'll bring those up for her as we go along. If you have any technical issues, please put it in the chat and I can get you to the right information for that. So with that being said, we'll hand it over to Keri.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So this is my shorter version of my very long title on this slide. So you're here in supporting students with mental health issues through collection development, outreach, reference, and instructions. Oh, sorry, reference and instruction, excuse me. So yes, I am my official title is college librarian, and I mainly work in acquisitions and assessment at SUNY Erie Community College at North Campus, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. So we're going to start with a quick poll, and so you can feel free, you can answer the poll. Hopefully it comes up. Yes, it is. So his question is, has mental health been a part of any of your library's discussions for fall 2020? I'll give you a little bit to answer that question. You can also feel welcome to put anything in the chat based on what discussions you've currently had. Okay, so most people have not been having that. A few have, but most people have not been having that conversation. But it's a really important one to have and one to start thinking about. There are probably some people here that are 12-month. There might also be some people like me who are 10-month employees. So you may not be, fully engaged in having that conversation, or it might be something that you're thinking about. But there's a lot to come back as we deal with our students coming back for the fall. And obviously the topic of mental health has changed a lot since I submitted this proposal back in February. Originally, when I was looking at this, I was going to be dealing mainly with library anxiety as a problem that we can control here within the library. Obviously, there's a lot of situations our students are coming into that we can't control that may be contributing additional stresses, as well as the anxiety they're feeling towards the library or towards their schoolwork, things with light changes, mental illness, which often appears in late adolescence. So we may have students that are just starting to have mental illnesses emerge for them. Obviously, mental health first aid, not all campuses have that option. We have the training on our campus, and I'm actually going to discuss that late in the session. But also we have students dealing with body dysmorphia, school stress, their own disabilities, and any lenses dealing with obviously sexuality, race. The mission that I was starting this presentation in was definitely student-based and more student-focused. And then everything stopped and we hit issues with COVID. And now we have to deal with students who might be dealing with a loss of life in their family, the illness that they've had it themselves and are still trying to recover. People have lost jobs, additional financial stress. Obviously, there's digital inequality in learning. There were students who may not have had a laptop at home, may not have had a hotspot, good internet connectivity. And then the additional stress of a lot of us had to become full-time teachers as well as full-time students or full-time workers, and juggling all of that. There were increases in domestic violence and uncertainty for the future still because there is no vaccine. And so when we were dealing with the anxiety towards the library, now that was shifting from just a focus on the students, but also assisting our fellow faculty and staff who were having technology issues and adaptations. Not a lot of them were also technology savvy. We are a Blackboard campus. They may have never used Blackboard before. So we were sort of in a role of not only navigating student anxiety and making sure they could have all the resources they need, but also getting ourselves into a position to help our faculty and our staff. And now we are in a mode of a social upheaval with obviously the issues that we are seeing with Black Lives Matter, with protests, with now there being, backlashes, and we have situations of people being, lynched. We have drive-by. There was a drive-by just the other day in Atlanta. So since George Floyd was brutally murdered, we are going to have students bringing with those racial issues that have now come to the surface. I can talk about Erie Community College. We are here, we have 3 campuses, a South Campus that is literally eye shot to where the Buffalo Bills play. I'm work at North Campus, that is also where our police academy is. And so there will definitely be a large effect on that between possibly the students that are here on campus for Police Academy and our student body, and of course our city campus, which is the most diverse of our campuses. It's in downtown Buffalo. Buffalo, besides being a racially diverse city, we also have a lot of refugee and immigrant settlement. So there are multiple languages spoken. So this will be definitely an effect on our students. Fortunately, Buffalo got a lot of publicity recently with Martin Gugino, and who remains in the hospital with a skull fracture and head injury. So we have to think about how this will affect our our Black students and our students of color, as well as our BIPOC faculty, staff, and librarians as well. So the question is, it just says the spring was unprecedented. This fall is going to bring new challenges and new stresses and a beleaguered student body, as well as faculty and staff to campus. So how are we going to rise to meet this if we truly are the heart of the campus, which is the topic for this conference? So I'm going to break this down into different sections, and probably this slide might be giving people anxiety on its own. So we're going to be talking first about reference. I'm going to deal with reference and go into instruction, because reference and instruction tend to have a lot of intersecting qualities because they're very one-on-one with students and the student body as a whole. So dealing with reference first, the major thing is library anxiety. And this is a term was coined by Constance Mellon in 1986. It still exists today. It's not something that we've solved or ever been able to solve. Students are overwhelmed by information and they're not sure where to begin. In teaching with students, usually that time management and looking where to begin has always been a struggle with students. From project information literacy on down, there has been more than enough studies showing us that students just don't know where to begin. And especially if they're not getting it from that quick Google search, then they just don't know where to turn. So there's this paralysis of fear, which is eating time because they delay seeking help until the last minute, because it's very hard for anyone to admit they don't know something. And then going into moving up to 1992, again, this is, probably a lot older than many of our students. So we do have a lot of non-traditional students who also feel these anxieties, is the library anxiety scale. And the library anxiety scale has been updated and updated and updated to sort of add different things in. But as far as when I was doing research for this, it really still, to me, holds true. And basically, it's lists, five different levels. The first is barriers with staff. They're not comfortable. They might see us as being unapproachable. They may have had a bad interaction, possibly in a public library, at a different academic library, with with the library that they're at. We don't, with our staffing now, have the comfort of saying, these are people who are uncomfortable. With the public, they're never going to do reference. They're only going to be behind the scenes. Everybody, at least I know with Erie and probably with a lot of the schools now, everybody teaches, everybody does reference at some point. We're on all hands on deck institutions now academically. So we can't have that separation. So that barrier with staff is still coming into play. The next is affective barriers, which is going to be things like we have students obviously with neurodeficits. As I mentioned, we have a lot of refugee and immigrant students. So sometimes there was a cultural barrier or a language barrier. We have students that have social anxiety. I personally am somebody who has social anxiety. I am horrific with eye contact because of that. And so I have to be cognizant of that when I'm working with students, because I know that language-wise, body language-wise, that can seem like I'm not being compassionate to them or being aware of them. So a lot of times I will point that out, that is a thing that I have. So we have to also be cognizant that our students may have that as well with their affective barriers. Comfort with the library. There's a lot of students who may have only used a public library. And there's a different comfort level. They've gone to reading programs, or maybe they have never experienced a library before. And now they're coming into this academic library, which, depending on the size of your institution, could be this huge building that's its only place, and they're not sure where to begin. And also knowledge of the library and mechanical barriers, which come into things like computer knowledge of using databases, using things beyond Google. These things are still relevant today. So I mentioned some of the barriers as far as that are leading into the anxiety scale, but we also have to be cognizant of microaggressions. And there's things that we might do or say that we may not realize are affecting our students. I know there was a great program yesterday on microaggressions, and they covered that in depth. And if you were not able to watch that program, please watch the recording, because they're going to deal with that more in depth than I'm going to be able to get into this presentation. But again, it's when you have to be sure you're not using any kind of insincere or even infantilizing language. You don't want to talk down to your students. You don't want to come off with a tone that's condescending, that's diminishing their help, that seems like you're being bothered. Like I said, we don't have that ability to push people to the side anymore. And we're dealing with issues in reference now where we still do some face-to-face, but who knows in the fall how much we're going to be doing. So reference is basically a face-to-face or virtual world now, and we're still dealing with a lot of students in a digital divide that may not totally know how to navigate or know how to even use our references, our reference services. It's also very difficult to read humor and sarcasm online. So you have to be very cognizant of that and be very wary when you're using humor. And you want to make sure that your patrons and your students users, whatever term you're using, can save face throughout their interaction. You want to be sincere when you're talking to them and sincere in your encouragement, and really learn to listen versus just jumping ahead, because sometimes that might come off as being, in a rush to get rid of them. Personally, I'm a person, and again, this is something I'm guilty of, being somebody who jumps ahead because I'm overeager to help them. But I also have to be very aware that it doesn't read that way. So that's where that self-awareness comes in. Know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Be cognizant of them. You're not going to have every reference interaction be perfect, but be mindful of the person that is in front of you or in line in front of you. And keep that empathy throughout, because you want to make sure they come back to you, that they know that this is a safe place where they can get the information that they need, that any question is, and sometimes that any question that they're giving is deserving of your attention. And a lot of times the library may be the place where they come for questions that aren't even library related. Just get them to the right place and try to have that empathy and feel for them. My mouse just fell off my desk because my cat jumped on it. So now we're going to move into instruction. And there are so many ways now that we are promoting instruction. We do one-shots, we do full courses, we do face-to-face, we do hybrid, asynchronous instruction, drop-ins, embedded librarians, tutorials, workshops, videos, LibGuides, games. We have a gamut of ways that we are approaching instruction. But coming back, library anxiety and a lot of those same barriers and those same microaggressions come up. And there is no one size fits all for learners, and our budget might affect what we're able to do. So there might be some people who have a large library, they can do a lot of one-on-one, they could do something where they assign librarians to students. If you can do that, great, where you can have a personal librarian program. But I think for a lot of us, I know for us at Erie, that's not something we can afford to do with almost 10,000 students. And, even with a part-time and a full-time crew, it's going to be really hard. So one way to sort of deal with instruction and library instruction is not only outreach, but assessment. And I know a lot of people think assessment is a dirty word, and it's something that we sort of fight against because it's come back to us as it's judging our work. It's putting us in a position where, it could affect our job evaluation. It could affect our career path. But for me, especially being somebody who deals in assessment, it can also be a wonderful tool for self-awareness and self-examination. One of the simplest and easy ways you can do this, and it's something you can even incorporate in your class, is just a 1-minute paper. And a 1-minute paper just could say something like, what 3 things did you learn today? Was there something you were confused about? Students can have the option of adding their email if they have further questions. A lot of people don't want to do that raising of a hand and asking a question. And that's mainly because a lot of people don't want a room full of people to know they don't know something. And this way you give that student a way, again, to save face, talk about where they may have had trouble, and then you can schedule possibly a one-on-one with that individual student to work with them and to get them back to that comfort level you need them to be. Pre and post testing and creating asynchronous levels from there. This is something that we're just starting to work on at Erie. We use the iLab from Alberta to do our pre and post testing. Unfortunately, with some classroom issues that we had in that we didn't have a classroom for most of last year, and we finally got our classroom and had, I think, one class, and then coronavirus hit. We haven't been able to fully work this out. We just found out that we received an IITG grant. So we'll be doing a little more with that in a pilot with North Campus pilot. So we'll be working on a pre and post test, but giving students asynchronous instruction so that they can work through and get to that comfort level. But they'll also have that face-to-face experience, hopefully, if we're able to come back to campus. Student evaluations. This is something you can do on your own. Just asking students, just having them do it again, like a 1-minute paper, a little post paper on what they thought of the class. You can embed any type of ratings in your tutorials. They are all able to be turned on. If you use any kind of LibGuides platform, you can link out to a Google form, and that lets you know possibly when we're creating tutorials, when we're creating workshops, things like that, we know this material. And a lot of times when we ask people to review this, because we may not have enough student workers or they may not have the time to do this, we're showing it to other people within our departments who know what they're looking for and what they're doing. So having the rating system might show us what we might be missing that students really need. Comments and feedback being open, and I used open-ish because we know what happens if we leave the comments open, especially if we're doing YouTube videos, things like that. So if you can do any kind of open-ish sort of comment system where you can control it a little more, have something that's more locked within Blackboard or more locked within your like I said, you can use like a Google form, something where people can comment, but it's not possibly out there in the world. You can do that to get some feedback. Forums, if you're using Blackboard or whatever your learning management system, are a really great way also to get that kind of input. And assignment restructuring, if you're able to get in, work with faculty, get that assignment to read in a way. Students are information seeking. If you have a lot of students coming into the library and they're really confused about assignment and they're asking the same questions, don't just send them back to their instructor and say, well, tell your instructor this, tell your instructor that. Take it upon yourself to reach out to the instructor and say, we're getting a lot of your students who are asking this question. If you leave it to the student, they may not address it. They may not feel comfortable addressing it. So take the lead and sort of be that barrier between the student and the faculty. And as you see at the bottom, I put instructor surveys way down at the bottom. They're good to have. Sometimes you do get an instructor who's great with constructive criticism, but a lot of times you're going to get that instructor that checks it off and just says, oh, you were great. And it's not having the same impact as the students that are receiving the lesson. So while they're important, they may not be the 100% be all end all that you're going to want to really know who you're reaching and what the comfort level is. And this is a muddy moment, which is another thing you can put in there. And so this is our muddy moment time. If you have any questions that you want to ask, from where we're at as far as instruction and reference and anxiety that we've covered so far, or if you just want to look at Q Puppy.
Keri, I don't see any questions in the Q&A right now or in the chat.
Okay. Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to move on then into collection development then. So now we're going to talk about collection development. And the first place I'm going to begin is intentional weeding. And what I mean by that is a lot of times we print dusty book reports. They're based on CERC. And in a way, when you start right there, they're already deceiving because they only show the books that haven't gone out. So the only book that you may have on a topic could be incredibly outdated, but that one's still going out because that's what's available, or you don't have enough on that topic. So not only are the new books going out, but the outdated ones are as well. So, and if you also, if you have too many things on an older topic, sometimes if you have too much in there, you're crowding out the new resources. So take a moment and actually walk the stacks of your collection. And I know that could be a vast group. Students tend to prefer the physical book and versus ebook. Now we sometimes don't have any control over that, but we can control our physical books. We can control our physical collection. A lot of our ebook and our streaming service is a vendor collection. So, I mean, we could go in and suppress records, but for the most part, we sort of just take a vendor collection of ebook or streaming materials and just sort of push that out there. But the physical collection we can actually control. And that's what your students are seeing when they walk in and they go to look for a book. If they're even able enough to look at the call number, sometimes they might sit after. A lot of students may not know how the call number and Library of Congress works, but you want to make sure when people are browsing your shelves and looking at your shelves that they're seeing the newer things that you're spending your money on, and that there's not older, outdated resources with language that is outdated. You may want to keep some things possibly for a historical use, but you have to make sure that the students that are looking at it, that there could be outdated language, harmful materials. So walking the stacks helps you get that visual of what's actually on your shelves. Once you're doing that, you can use the language of MUSTY. MUSTY comes from the Crew Reading Manual for Modern Libraries. It's a Texas State and Archives Commission report. It's been updated. Last update was 2012, but it still holds sort of true. The M part, it's sort of a crap test for your collections. The M part is misleading. So again, is it sort of talking about a topic that, maybe now is not true? The U is ugly. So basically those books that are really damaged, well-loved, that maybe you should get a new copy for. The S is superseded. You might find that you have the first, second, and third edition on the shelf. The T is trivial. If you're looking sometimes and you have space that needs to compact, there might be some things in there that possibly were purchased because someone thought they were cute and fun 15 years ago, but maybe they don't need to be there anymore. The I is irrelevant. Is it something that, again, has been superseded, isn't true? Do you really need that Windows 98 manual anymore? You probably don't. And the E is elsewhere. Again, this comes if you have to do a large compacting project. Is this something that you're going to be able to find quickly and easily on the internet? Do you have a database that covers that? 10-year-old things from 10-year-old pro-con things. We all have probably some form, either from New York State or from our own collections, pro-con databases. Do we still need all these old pro-con books that we used to have? If we're in a space crunch, we may have to do that. And also, once we do that kind of work, we have to mind the gap. And that's where we see where are there gaps in our collections. Again, once we remove a lot of those things that are having outdated language or harmful language or materials, we also need to look at, are we missing any types of updated and newer materials, or is there a gap in the materials that we have? Is that why we only have older books? And that's when we move to intentional purchasing, where we're going to fill those gaps. make sure that there is a spectrum of views that reflect your student body. Update and focus your mental health resources. There are some of the resources that tend to go out the most with our students, so make sure that you are having the most updated mental health resources, and also look for mental health and health resources focused on your student body. For example, make sure that you have books on transgender health, transgender mental health, that you have books dealing directly with different mental illnesses, anxiety, depression, ADHD, things that are focused towards college students, things that are focused towards Black or POC students, that you are filling those gaps, not just with your mental health and your health issues, but also things with philosophy. Do you have a lot of books from Black authors? Do you have a lot of books from authors of color? Do you have books that are all of your philosophy books just, possibly a smattering of Eastern and possibly white male Western? Do you have feminist philosophy? Do you have Black philosophers? Do you have philosophers of color? Make sure that you are engaging different viewpoints, and that so that your collections are also the spectrum of your students. And then that also falls into what I'm talking about, updated and diverse. And the last part is getting your money's worth. This is going to be so crucial going forward. Please, you have to be mindful of your budget. It has to have the most impact. This is where you can look to see, as we get into Alma and Alma sharing, if there's a book or a subject talk with your ILL librarians. If there's a book in a subject a lot of people are requesting, make sure that you're covering that topic, because that's a topic of interest. Do you need the $198 cover? Do you need the $198 hardcover when the $35 soft cover covers the same collection? And also, when you're dealing with that impact, be mindful of having a small leisure collection or a small mental health collection that's also including things with yoga, with meditation. And again, make sure you're going in a diverse spectrum. Those meditation and yoga can be very whitewashed, so make sure that you're getting a diverse perspective on that. Leisure collections can be great to break down student anxiety and library anxiety by having a collection that fulfills a need. It makes students more relaxed. It also tends to bring more staff into the library and get them more acquainted with you, and can help build those relationships that you have. So that's another part to consider. And you want to make sure that your collections, your library, your displays, that you're having diversity in all of those areas. Does anybody have any questions as far as collection development and outreach?
Hi, Keri. I don't see any in here right now, nor in the chat.
Okay. So I'm hoping that means that I'm covering everything, or people aren't in their pajamas and fell asleep. So the last part we're going to talk about outreach. And a lot of the outreach we were doing in the library were stress weeks and stress areas. At SUNY Erie, we had StressLess Fest. Our first one we did was at North Campus. We did different activities every day. Sometimes it was just us doing yoga or a knitting circle, and other times we had students that were greatly interested. And what we learned when we did our StressLess Fests were students like things where they could do it quickly or grab and go. Food is always was always the great thing for students, but also a quick thing like making buttons. We have a button maker, and that's by far our most popular tool in our Maker Lab, but also quick stress balls, things like that. Puzzles and games haven't really worked. Our students tend to see the library as a workplace. So we're still working with our student association to sort of get that barrier past. You know, I come in, I do my paper, I read something, I work in a group and leave. Therapy dogs, we've had several therapy dog events, like it's mindful yoga and meditation, having people coming in, as I mentioned, feeding students. We had a small maker lab that was about to become a large maker lab, then COVID. So right now it is an empty maker lab with things still in boxes, but puzzles, coloring pages, things to allow students to um, relax, take their mind off things. And when we were slowly getting our students working into this, we have a Cricut cutter. So getting that makerspace involved with students and giving them a space where they can create, they can use the 3D printer to create their own projects. So that has worked out really well for us as far as having a face-to-face area. But now we hit spring. And a lot of these things had to move to virtual environments. And some people were able to create these StressLess LibGuides. The first one that I saw was from Brian Sajecki and Molly Maloney from UB. I tried to get one up in time, but I was embedded in 6 courses and it just did not happen. So that might be something that I have to get together for fall. I do have a mental health one that I pushed and I put into our LibGuides, but as far as the stress one, it just unfortunately could not get done. But a lot of those things, virtual tours, online puzzles, online coloring pages, virtual yoga and meditation, a lot of the schools were doing that. Many cute fuzzy animals. We had a lot of those things going on. So now, what are we going to do for fall? And going back to the beginning of the slide, as we saw, a lot of people haven't really been talking about student mental health, faculty mental health, staff mental health, and even their own. So some of the things, nope, go backwards. So some of the things you may want to think about is if you do have a virtual stress LibGuide or mental health LibGuides, promote them early. If you have any type of control of your webpage, I know not everybody does, try to connect that through your LibGuides. If you have not been able to do any kind of mental health or virtual or relaxation or stress LibGuide, try to make one. Try to work with running virtual programming, be that book clubs, guided meditation, guided yoga. I listened a little bit. I was able to hear some of the lightning talks. So possibly doing, and of course this is if you're able to pay people, doing possibly an online drag story hour or even an online story hour if you cannot afford to pay someone, or online crafting. Have things. We're looking to do something at Maker Monday with our Maker Lab, be it virtual or face-to-face. Try to have a movie night if you have streaming services that have public performance rights. That's what I'm looking for. So if you have a streaming service that has public performance rights, Canopy has that, Alexander Street Avon has that. You can maybe use some of the movies for possibly a discussion with some of the documentaries, more of a relaxing thing with, a feature film. Have open WebEx hours for workshops, or just to have a group of students that come in, ask questions, work together. If you haven't reached out to your counseling or your student association to collaborate on online or face-to-face events, please try to do so. The summer is a little more of a slower time. So that a good place to sort of get your foot in. We've been having some meetings right now trying to figure that out. But honestly, I know for a lot of people it's hard because we don't know who we're going to be or where we're going to be coming into fall 2020. And it's a stressful time for everyone. But start thinking of how you're going, besides thinking of your classes and your library services, try to put that through a lens of your student mental health and your faculty and staff mental health. And go and think about that empathy and that work that you're going to need to do, because we're going to have a very it's going to be very hard if we are all online or online for part of the time. It's going to be very hard to reach our students. We want to make sure that they feel like this campus is for them. And the last part, I would say, of anything you're doing, whether it is a face-to-face or a virtual, is assess, assess, assess. And a big part of that is for the self-reflection that is going to allow you to know what works and what doesn't. Don't be afraid of assessment. Assessment is your friend. I know people don't like it. I'm here to tell you assessment is your friend. I work in assessment, not only through the library, but also I'm an assessment mentor for the institution. And it's really, it's a good thing. I will hold your hand. Anybody who wants to reach out to me and help you become friends with assessment.
Keri, you have about 5 minutes.
Yep. I'm going to run through mental health first aid real quick, just because I just want to touch on it really quick. If you have the opportunity to take mental health first aid through an organization, through your campus, through a public library, please do so. This is their website. In the slides, this will be linked. Mental health first aid, this is their description. It gives people the skills to help people with a mental health problem or who are experiencing mental health crisis. And it also helps develop mental health literacy, identify, understand, and respond to mental illness. It works off the LG plan. The koala, his name is LG, and this is what LG stands for. Assess the risk of suicide or harm, listen, not judgmentally, give reassurance and information, encourage appropriate professional help, and encourage self-help and other support strategies. And points to remember for this is to know your limits and your bandwidth. If you are in a position where you are feeling anxious already, you're having anxiety in your life, you have another mental health issue, know that you may not be able to help someone at that time. Know your own bandwidth. You should not have to don't take on that emotional labor if you can't handle it at that time. It's this whole thing where you see somebody put on an oxygen mask, you put on your own oxygen mask before you help others. Know your limits and your bandwidth. You cannot solve this. You are not you are certified, but you are not a trained professional. Refer to mental health professionals as the first option. Refer them to their counseling. Contact we have crisis services here in Buffalo. If there is know who your mental health options are in your area, to refer to those people, to have them come in first. If it is a serious situation and you do feel like you do need to have an outside person come in, request an ambulance for a medical, and stress it as a medical issue, because ambulance EMTs are trained to de-escalate. And this is sometimes, if there is a transportation needed, they're going to be the ones to take that person and transport them. And you continue training, always continue knowing there's always more to learn. Again, you're not a psychologist, you're not a mental health professional. This is a program, your certification runs 4 years. You have to recertify every 4 years. Actually, this December, my certification is up, so I'm hoping I have to do my recertification training. I did mine December 2016, and it's really helped inform a lot of the ways I do my collection development, my assessment, but also when I'm teaching and doing reference. So that is it, and I have my works cited, and I see some questions, so I'm going to let Jennifer ask those.
All right. So we only have 1 minute left, but let's see if we can get through some of these. With your stress relief events, what have your experiences been with mental health services or other relevant services on campus?
Um, with our StressLess, the first time we did it, honestly, there was just two of us, and we kind of threw things on the wall to see what would stick. There was some. We had worked with SGA, which is our student government, was doing some things, so we sort of worked in tandem with them. But as we've moved forward now, I actually did the mental health first aid training right around that time. We have counseling now in the same building as the library. So now that we have counseling within the same unit, they're in the same, like I said, within the same building. We've been working to build those relationships. Aaron, the main counselor, he has come into our library meetings and talked to us about different resources that they have in student services. And so we're having a really good relationship with both them and student access to make sure that not only are we dealing with student mental health, but also making sure our accessibility options are on point.
Okay, it's 9:46, so I think we need to leave to get to the keynote. Do you want me to cut and paste and send the questions to you, or whoever has asked her maybe can email her independently?
Yeah, let me go back to my, yeah, sorry. I know, just going fast. So this is my contact information. Whiteside at ecc.edu is my email. I will, you're going to get a bounce back because I'm a 10-month. So it's going to tell you I'm not checking my email very much, but I will be checking it. So I may not get back to you right away, but I will definitely get back to you because I'm one of those people who still checks their email.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For attending, and the slides will be available. I'll need to make sure we get the PDF onto the website for anyone who has any questions.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.